Welcome to Clubby. Hi, I'm Rick Brimacombe of Brimacombe and Associates. I am your architect of business growth and will work with you to unlock your potential and amplify the scale of your company. Today, we're talking about RCDView data. Simpler can be better. I want to thank our sponsors, Irish Titan, an e-commerce and web development firm, Boulay Group, CPAs and advisors, Highland Bank, a locally owned community bank, Romaine Berg, a digital marketing agency, Minnesota Sales, a sales acceleration firm, Host Pros USA, a managed service provider of website support, management, security, and reliability, and last but not least, the Network Connect, a catalytic gateway for catalyzing and growing your company. First of all, before we get started, I'd like you to subscribe and like our Clubby channel. Just take a moment. I'll wait for you. This allows us to serve you better, our wonderful audience, as well as let you know when we are going live with our events. And now you can also catch our Clubby sessions on your favorite podcast platform. Okay, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Scott Rydberg. Welcome, Scott.
Hello.
Scott's contact information is in the comments field, and so you can reach out to Scott after the fact and connect up with him. All right, Scott, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your firm, and the various activities you're involved with.
Well, I started my career at the airlines, specifically Northwest Airlines, worked there for a number of years as a technician, aircraft instructor on 747s. And when they decided to leave the state of Minnesota and go to the state of Georgia, I stayed behind and found that I could go into business for myself. So I purchased a couple of companies and rebranded it as River City Data. We are a business service bureau with multiple services, document scanning, microfilm, microfiche conversion, book scanning, wide format scanning, and also we are a data center. In other words, we house other people's data and sell them space on our servers.
Okay. I'm curious, you mentioned that you bought a couple of different companies. Was there anybody in your family or a role model or anything that caused you to go the entrepreneurial route?
Yeah, I had a relative, an uncle that had done similar things out in California, and he was a bit of a mentor to start with, and that's probably a good thing to have when you go into business, I found out. So
yeah, I have a belief that most people who end up going the entrepreneurial route have somebody that they emulate or that's a mentor or whatever. So glad that you are out there doing the things that you're doing. Okay, before we get to our event, let's discuss what you, our audience, can receive for your participation. You can put your questions into the comments field as well as catch Scott's email there. Today's hashtag is hashtag digital office. Up to 3 winners can receive a free on-site evaluation of your business, and you'll get a free quote to convert all of your paper documents, microfilm products, books, or wide format documents to digital and right size your business storage needs. Okay, so again, the hashtag is digital office, and up to 3 winners will be chosen. All right, so people have been talking about the paperless office for several years. What level of digital filing do business owners and their companies really need?
well, of course, the answer to that is going to vary depending on the size of your business. If you're a one-person shop versus 20 or even 100 is quite different. But in general, you always have to keep all your receipts, bank statements, invoices, etc. For tax return purposes for at least 3 years. I recommend longer because I've already had some experience with that. They go back and ask for records for farther back in some cases. Employment records, tax records for your employees for 4 years, 7 years if it's depreciation, payoff notice, information about assets or loans, and it can be even longer. And there's a lot of businesses such as medical entities, legal entities, mortgage companies. They have to keep records forever, and the rules keep changing. So you're gonna have to check with your CPA and your legal team. And if you go public, get big enough for that, then of course Sarbanes-Oxley rules apply.
So what type of businesses are a good fit with River City Data?
So obviously the bigger the better for us. We do primarily court records right now. We have We handle all the court records, not all the records, but a good portion of the records for the state of Minnesota, 83 out of 87 counties, and North Dakota. And so the bigger the better for us. It takes a lot of paper to support our business. We do several thousand boxes of document scanning per year. So if I walk into a place and there's a lot of file cabinets, I start to drool. The longer the retention schedule, the better suited they are for our services. So government entities, schools, medical facilities, legal businesses, and anyone with long-term document storage needs.
So I think almost everybody's had something happen on their home computer where they either lost data or were worried about losing data. I know that I had a little bit of a scare before we got everything back up and running a year or two ago. On the business front, what would happen if a business were hit by a natural disaster and did not have a digital backup?
Well, it's funny because it happened last summer down in Iowa. I won't mention the county, but they had a tornado that hit their courthouse, and they were forced to try and get what remaining records they had and get them into storage in a storage facility in another building. And yeah, they just permanently lost some records that we'll never get back. And how important were they? Who knows? A lot of historical archive stuff, things like that. Also happened during the St. Peter storm. I was living in the Twin Cities at the time, and it happened in St. Peter, an hour drive away. I had papers in my front lawn from a tax CPA business that I picked up. I gathered as many as I could, and I sent to them. Did you just imagine what that would do to their customers, or how it financially it hit them, or even having no answers for the IRS on certain things? Probably not a good situation.
Definitely, definitely not good. Hey, tell the audience what indexing means and how indexing a company's documents can help with efficiencies.
Yeah, and I'm going to just change it slightly to how does digitizing and indexing a company's documents help? It saves money. Some interesting reading. I'm going to try and do this from memory, but about 90% of corporations still have their corporate memory on paper. And most of the paper they have, they just shuffle around. And 50% of any given professional's time is spent looking for information, and only 5 to 15% of it is being read. About, I think it was 7.5% of all documents are lost in the world, and 3% of those are misfiled. It costs 25%, or I'm sorry, it costs $25,000 to fill your typical average 4-drawer filing cabinet, and $2,000 a year to maintain it. So if you don't think there's costs in the paper, I get that all the time. Oh, we have a system and it's good enough. Yeah, it's still costing you money. We can reduce that cost a lot just by digitizing all that paper. You'll spend $220 in labor to reproduce a lost document, or $120 in labor to find a misfiled document, which happens all the time because we get those boxes in and they're always misfiled. And there's $20 in labor just to file a document. So with 4 trillion paper documents in the US alone, growing at over 20% per year, and the average document being copied 19 times, reducing that paper load is really important.
So some digital conversion, at least to a certain degree, makes sense for most folks, if not all folks. But should everything actually be converted to digital?
No, in fact, rarely does any business or entity digitize everything, nor should you. Of course, some of the rules will be set by your CPA and IRS, things like that, telling you what to keep. But in general, most people can really weed through a stack and know what's really necessary and what's not. For the courts, for example, we have a book that's about 1.5 inches thick that our ladies basically memorize to know exactly what to keep in a file and what not to. So we have 8 people right outside my door going through paperwork, and they are told strictly what to keep and what not to keep the cost of a file. to a minimum. So same thing applies to anybody that's digitizing. You have to reduce that down to the minimum you absolutely need.
Okay, so a couple of things here. A reminder that you can submit your questions into the comment field. Scott's email is there as well. Hashtag digital office to be put into a drawing. Up to 3 winners will get a free assessment and quote from the folks at River City Data. And so anyway, again, put your questions into the comments field. All right, so what's the best method for business owners to digitally file their record? And does company size have any impact on the type of solution that they should use?
Well, I'll just start by saying I think every business needs to own a scanner. I don't care if it's a desktop Fujitsu or any other high speed alternative here. Obviously, we use high speed alternatives. But if you walk into a business office nowadays and there's no scanner in your room, you really have to ask yourself what they're doing, because they should be storing everything electronic. Maybe not your smallest business, but I think it's a good idea for every business person, even if you're a one person operation, to start scanning right from day one and put it into your computer. You'll always have it, you'll be able to organize it. It just saves you a lot of grief and hassle later on. And actually, if you work with cheap software alternatives, like relatively cheap QuickBooks, you can bring that right into your financial accounting software and deal with them, all your incoming and outgoing purchase orders, payables, all your invoices. It's a great way to get started and a good way to run your business.
Yep, and you mentioned talking to your CPAs. Just a reminder for the folks in our Club E audience, Boulay Group CPAs and Advisors are one of our sponsors. BoulayGroup.com is the website, so please visit them. I'm sure they would be happy to walk you through what you should be keeping and for how long and so forth. All right, and then again, a reminder to everybody that you can catch Club E on your favorite podcast platform. So if you want to learn more about today's conversation with Scott from River City Data or any of our past episodes, you can check us out on your favorite podcast platform. All right. So is it better to store data locally with a small company or off in the cloud someplace else?
Well, I personally, as a business owner, like to deal locally whenever possible. And I think small companies in this area, for sure, prefer that. Sending it off somewhere to somebody else's cloud, you run the risk of, will I ever see it again? I'm sure it's fine and stable and a good alternative to not saving it digitally at all. But is Google going to pick up the phone when you call, or are you going to be able to get your data back, or how sure are you that your data has been removed from their platform when you decide to do so, and how are you sure that you get it all back? Whereas if you're somebody in the local community, they know where I live, they know where I work, they know where we're at, they can come in anytime, look at the data that they've got stored on there and make adjustments to it and just say, we've got to take this person out of there because of whatever reason. It's all right here, it's close by, and seems like you would have better control of it. It's really about the same expense, so there's no benefit to using anybody else really than a local storage facility like this.
And Scott, you folks have been in business for how long again?
This company has been here for 30 years, and I've only had it now for the last 11. But it's changed dramatically in the last 15 years to become more of a data center than what they started out as, was doing microfilm and microfiche for the courts. And then it just kind of blossomed from there. So it's become a much more full service bureau.
And then I believe in talking before our event, your government work is roughly 70% of the business, and then you work with businesses for that. Yep.
Yeah, that percentage varies depending on where we're at in the biennium of the state contract, and then just times like this have really changed it. So we're doing more private business right now than we normally would do.
So how has the COVID crisis changed your government business, or for that matter, your entire business?
It didn't really affect it at the beginning of it, but in the end of June, we were told to halt on our state contracts because the state is just pulling back on their contracts until they know where their budget is at. So it may just delay it for a number of months, but they'll start again, I'm sure. So we're backfilling with other work that we either couldn't get to before, or we're pending and waiting for us to finish up on the state work. So
Okay. Reminder to everybody that you can submit your questions for Scott into the comments field, #digitaloffice, to get in the drawing to have a free assessment of your company's digital storage needs. Speaking of digital storage, enterprise content management, ECM, what are the benefits of an ECM program, and at what size should a company implement an ECM?
of course, there's no perfect right answer, and I'm not going to stand behind anything I say. But what I would say is that it's going to vary depending on your size and your budget, how much money you have to spend. Obviously, if you can buy a little more capability in the software, it might be worth it, especially if you're in a growth mode. It'll pay off later. But there's probably as many softwares out there as there are companies in the world. They're growing and expanding daily. I've had experience with a few, one of them being Laserfish, and I'm not giving any you know bit of plugs here for any particular company. I'll just say I've run into Laserfish, on base, Zoho, some of those big names, and OpenText is another one. And they're fairly expensive. It'll cost you about $100,000 to get into a copy of Laserfish. So we see those usually with cities, counties, and those kind of businesses. If you're just starting out, work with, I'd say, QuickBooks as long as you can. The day that a customer calls up and you can't answer a question about their account within, say, 20 seconds, you probably need a faster system, or a better system for keeping track of your records. If you have to go to a file cabinet, you're really in the hurt locker. So, because that's about the attention span out there. You need answers quickly. You should be able to look up somebody's name on the computer, look up their date of birth, or whatever it is you have indexed in there, and bring that information up quickly. And you can do it with a simple file cabinet system like RCDView, which is really all it is a file cabinet with a few index properties that you can look for: name, date of birth, date range, some kind of a control number that is in there, like their ID number or whatever, member ID number. And you can quickly get the information you need. All the way to some of these other softwares like Cygen, which it'll take all your incoming emails and keep them in a bucket for you. It'll take all your incoming billings, your purchase orders, and put it into a system that basically creates a flow chart, a digital flow chart of all those activities for you, and keep everybody on the same page virtually. And those are pretty reasonable alternatives. I can think of, for very small businesses, I can think of several names that come up that would be a good place to start. I would say Cygen is one of them out of Nebraska, and another one would be Virtual Office, which is very close down in, well, they're in West Salem, Wisconsin, but they're right just a suburb of La Crosse. And so again, shop local. They're close by. If you have issues, you can deal with them. So just do your homework. I'm not picking anyone over the other, but make sure you do your homework and get several demos from several different companies is my recommendation, because there's also pitfalls. One of the pitfalls is there are companies out there still, I can think of one, big one, that will take your data, put it on their server, and unless you stay with them, you lose your data forever. It becomes proprietary to them. And you don't want to get into one of those kind of contracts, because you'll be like a huge surgery center that I just dealt with that lost all their data. because they didn't keep their paper copies after it was digitized, which you normally don't have to do, but they weren't allowed access to their records again because that company held them hostage for them to sign up again, which they didn't want to do. It was too expensive. So just be careful of that and check all the fine print and get really a lot of bids up front. Here we don't, none of this data is ours, it's yours. It's not proprietary to us. We're not going to hold it hostage. You can take it or leave it anytime. You can stop at any time, that sort of thing. So just make sure that whoever you're dealing with is doing the same thing. So,
Yeah, that is not good.
no,
Definitely not good. So when you go out and visit companies, how many of them have any sort of kind of efficient digital storage system, or are they all kind of flying blind?
um, I'd say right now it's about 50-50. Almost all the large scale companies we do business with have had a system in place. But I'll name, if I could name some companies, which I won't, it's proprietary information, but there are some large companies out there that don't have systems, believe it or not, which helps me stay in business
Hmm.
because, I'm doing a lot of extra work for them that they've created these just massive paper storage facilities that now they have to take care of and get rid of eventually. But in the process, it's all got to be converted, which never had to happen. If they'd have bought a good enterprise content management system of some sort, they wouldn't be in that mess. But they're much larger than you would expect. Um,
What about for the mid-sized companies, middle market, lower middle market, emerging companies? What about for those types of businesses?
and it speaks to the power of some of these programs out there like QuickBooks, how large you can go within that scale and still have it work pretty well. So it doesn't have to be an expensive alternative either. I would say there it's probably when you get below 50 employees, generally speaking, there's no system at all ever. Um, Above that, you get from 50 to 150 employee base. Again, it depends on the industry, but there's probably a good bunch, 20 to 40% somewhere in there that do have some kind of a software system. And we support those kind of companies because, again, all we are and all we offer is just a digital file cabinet, which you can access at any time from your computer. So a simple system like that is a very reasonable alternative compared to going out and buying an ECM system. But when you finally get to a certain scale, you are going to need that, especially if you have a lot of invoices and purchase orders. And, it doesn't take long for like a construction company to grow big and then lose track of all their paper. So they're going to need a system at some point.
So for this middle market, lower middle market, emerging company universe, what are some of the common mistakes that you see when you go out and visit them?
Yeah, we usually they bite off more than they could chew. They got dazzled by a salesperson that gave them many more bells and whistles in a software than they ever would need or use in 20 years. You shouldn't buy more than 5 to 10 years out, I would say, as far as capability. If there's functionality in there you can't use today, then you have to really start questioning whether you need it at all and when would you need it. For example, saving all your emails. Well, it turns out most suppliers of email systems that you sign up for, like Yahoo or whatever, you can get all that if there was some sort of investigation of your company. It's all stored somewhere. So you don't really need some of these fancy systems that tag onto your email systems and save it all. It's great if you're a Fortune 500 company to have that, but smaller companies don't need it, but they will try to sell it to you, because it sounds like you might need it, right? Again, not required by law until you're much bigger. There's other ones that basically say we can connect all these things together in a nice workflow chain, and so all the right people in your company are getting the right paper as it's scanned in as it comes in. Basically, at the front door, when they pick up your mail, or unless you have a system of digital POs, you still have somebody scanning in your invoices and purchase orders and things like that. Well, there's all kinds of different ways that that's handled by various software companies. So you need to find one that works for you. It may have been built for a certain industry, which it works great in the, like my son is a managing engineer for a company that builds buildings in the Twin Cities. His software would not work for me at all. I mean, it's great for their industry. So you also have to find one that is proven as a key software in your industry. How do you find those? Talk to obviously your peers in your own industry, which we don't always do. I don't always talk to. I'm not really great friends with a lot of people in my service bureau industry because, well, we're competing a lot. But sometimes we help each other out too. So you can find somebody in common in your business that probably has a software that would give you a recommendation on it if you ask.
So it sounds a little bit like a couple of our sponsors in the world that they live in. Again, Irish Titan does e-commerce and web development, and Romaine Berg, digital marketing, digital strategy. And so Irish Titan and Romaine Berg often get called in when something is going wrong at a company, or the company, like you said, bit off more than they can chew, or uh, Romaine Berg and Irish Titan come in to fix a problem. And it sounds like you have to go through that same kind of thing as well.
Yeah, and I'll put my plug in for Romaine Berg because I also use them, and their SEO capability is phenomenal. That's the way I'll leave that. So and that I did that by looking at 5 or 6 different companies before I settled on them, which is the right thing to do, I think, in all cases. And the biggest problems I see out there is when you don't do that kind of homework, especially with something as big as buying a software, a piece of enterprise content management. So,
Okay. So as we aim towards the finish line here, Scott,
yeah,
if you had to leave the audience with one main thing as a takeaway from our conversation today, maybe you want to reiterate something you've already said, or maybe we didn't get to something that you feel is important. But what would that one thing be that you'd like to leave with the audience?
I'd say don't buy more than what you need. Um, Surprising how many, like even Fortune 500 public companies, buy something because it has all this capability, and all they needed was something as simple as RCDView. Then I've seen it happen over and over again. They throw out that software and they end up settling for something that's much simpler and way below the budget that they were spending. So sometimes simpler is better.
Okay. Simpler, better. That works in a lot of different ways. Good advice.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Again, folks out there in our listening audience, whether you are on the live stream or a podcast platform, you can reach out to Scott. Comments field will have his email address. But for those of you out there with a pen, want to write it down, it's scott@rivercitydata.com. And Scott, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it, and hope to have you back again sometime soon.
Well, thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Okay, thanks, Scott.